Hey everyone, welcome back to She Barb's podcast. Today's guest is Zaira Pirzada. I see I told you I was going to pronounce it wrong. Thank you so much for coming on my podcast today.
Yeah, absolutely, Brooke. Thank you so much. You pronounced it perfectly fine. You're
Oh,
fine. You're fine.
Zara is a poetry writer. So can you tell our listeners what inspired you to dabble into poetry?
Yeah. Whew. This one, I'm ready to answer this one better because, there are so many sources. So, when I was young, I learned that my grandfather was a poet, and I'd always spend so much time with my grandparents and saw his keen interest in writing as well as being academically involved. And that really inspired me. Plus, I always had a knack for reading. I
Mhm.
attribute a lot of that practice in reading and the passion in reading, like furthering it to my mother, who always took my brother and I to the library. Um,
Mhm.
and I just started to dig around for
Mhm.
books, for poetry, and I fell in love with this idea of um, of writing poetry, mostly through older artists, like old
Mhm.
Urdu poets or German poets.
Ooh,
So that's how I was inspired early on.
that's amazing. Have you ever read the book Love Poets to a Poet? Well, that's one of the girls that I interviewed. That's her poetry book. But it was have you ever watched Sex in the City?
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
And then
not fully. To be fair, I don't want to mislead people. Like I caught clips of it.
well, on the movie, she was reading a poetry book that was by a lot of men who wrote love poems. So I forgot what the name of it was called. It was like love poems to something or something. Like it was really nice. You should check that one out. It was by older poetry writers. So
Must have been the romantics, the
yeah,
metaphysical poets. Like there's a lot of schools of poetry, and everyone feels romance. So you're bound
that's
to find a lot of it.
true. So what does your family think of your poetry?
They like it. I wasn't so keen on sharing that I wrote for such a long time. I
Mhm.
used to just do it by myself. And so when I released the book, I think a lot of people who didn't know me through social media, especially my mother and father, were like, "Oh, you write that? Oh, you do that?" So I guess it was a mix of surprise and joy because they really liked reading it as well. Um,
That's amazing.
yeah.
That's amazing to have that support though. Like usually some families don't support the artists like the writers and stuff. So that's good to have that support. So
Well,
so what inspired your book Kurban? Am I
oh,
pronouncing it
Quran? No, that's
right?
totally fine. It is a foreign word. It's in Arabic. Like, what inspired it? You know, I've written a lot of stuff, and the stuff in this uh, in this book, it's not old stuff. I I was writing all through the beginning of the Trump administration
Mhm.
into the COVID times,
Mhm.
and through my journey of love and slowly but surely love loss. So it honestly it was one of the more sensitive times in my life where I was mostly aware and present,
Mhm.
and I decided to share it. I decided to
Mhm.
share it because I know that a lot of people will understand where I'm coming from. So you'll see allusions to the school shootings that we've dealt with in the States. You'll see allusions to being an immigrant. You'll see allusions as well to being Black in America or being a part of the Latinx community, the South Asian community, just people of color in general and our perceptions. So
Mhm.
I was inspired by the times.
Oh, that's nice. Wow. So can we purchase your book on your website, on your page on
Yeah,
Facebook?
you can actually, luckily, there's something like Google. You can look up
Yeah.
honestly, so every independent bookseller has it. That's the title, Qurbaan, and that's the cover. And if you're an avid purchaser of things from Amazon, I know a lot of people are.
Mhm.
Ethics aside for just a moment. Not that we should always put it aside, but you can there. You can find it across independent booksellers as well. So just Google the book, and you're bound to find it from the source of your choosing.
Oh, nice. I'm gonna go check that out. So can you read one of your poems for the American that made me?
Ah, okay. Yeah. All right. So for the America that made me, just to preface this, I thought a lot about my becoming in this country as a South Asian Muslim female, and then more generally as a woman of color growing up in New York. And this started to become a piece that could have gone on forever, but I did have to cut it down some bit, and I'm so glad I did because you'll understand why. There wasn't much to say after what I said last, so I'll start. For the America that made me. Somewhere on the rooftop, through secret stairs of the laundromat, where Mom spent her last coin to dull the noses of the white kids pondering my spiced closet, I rapped to Biggie with my broken English. A commandment to failed systems that sustained salsa on the streets and Chinese below, where I was little India, feeling the weight of being more than America could help. We, of alien lands, under patriots, lived in the fabric, indelible color painting necessary culture, a reprisal to this bloodied Protestant utopia, this unlikely outcome to the post-native genocide. How lucky these stars and stripes are. The rocket's red glare found us through railroads stained in immigrant blood, held steady by the bones of tribes and slaves, giving truth to the night that our flags are still here. USA, the ungrateful, shriveling, anxious? This is the irony of the land of the free, never liberated from the ruling gaze, and timidity masked in exclusionary badges. Imperialized neighborhoods, migrations to the outskirts, shackles and cells suffocating our kin, and redactions of our beings into the history hidden between the textbook lines, only my brown eyes can see.
Wow.
They love us so much they watch. They hate us so much they hide. The ugly truth is in the chaos, a masquerading identity following roots meeting lands to nowhere. While our truth lives on our skin, it sings from our tongues. You know what I think? Jealousy finds its reflection in the America that made me.
Wow, that's amazing. Listening to that, it made me realize like people people hate what they don't understand. They hate what they have no knowledge of. So that's what I got from that. So
Yeah, yeah. It comes out mostly in that in the second part where I say redactions of our beings into the history hidden between the textbook lines only our brown eyes can see, meaning, uh, there's an unwritten history.
mm,
The unwritten history is how people of color arrived here and what
mhm,
they've gone through to survive here and to build this country as well. And not just that, how natives on this land have lived here forever before anything ever was, and how this is their land. How all people of color have had
mhm,
their journey, and the
mhm.
journey is redacted entirely in history.
Right.
And
Right.
this is what we know.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. What was your hardest scene to write from that poem that you just read?
The hardest thing to write. I I think the hardest thing to write on this calling was being open. This is actually one of the poems I'm most scared of announcing and speaking out loud because of current times and political times. But it's just a feeling. It's an outpour. It's an outcry as much as anybody else's. The hardest thing to write was the USA. What I did is I put in small parentheses white, but I didn't
Mhm,
capitalize white. I put the in parentheses white, muted, ungrateful, shriveling, anxious. USA. We don't United States of America. Maybe it's the ungrateful, shriveling, anxious. The people I'm calling out here are not all people identify as white, but rather those that shrivel in anxiety and fear and dread of people of color. Why?
Mm-hmm.
And the hardest thing to write was that acronym being turned around because I kept thinking to myself, United? No. And it was calling it out. That was hard.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really amazing. I don't know what to say about that. Like, wow. I'm definitely going to be thinking about that. Wow.
I,
So what do you like to do when you're not writing?
oh, so many things. I have to divvy up my time. I am an actress as well. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, and I not premeditating it falsely. I'm manifesting it because I'm working on it. I'm creating a visual piece for each of the 30 poems in this book before I go on to publishing anything next. And
wow.
yeah, and I intend on fully acting through it with a lot of my cohort from my acting school and otherwise some friends. So I like to act.
Oh,
Uh, and I love to work out. I used to compete as a lifter. So
wow.
I still try to keep up with a lot of things in different ways. And I like learning instruments. So I'm learning sitar right now. I should be a better student, but I enjoy making sound with it. So various things.
What is this? What did you call it? Satar?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
You got it. It's like a Indian guitar, very complex. It has like about 10, 12 upwards of strings at the bottom and 5 on top. You ever heard of Ravi Shankar?
No.
He has this famous Woodstock performance that if you look up, it's a very serene, ethereal sounding instrument. It's a string instrument.
Wow.
It's somewhat complex, so it does take a lifetime to learn. I give myself the humility and patience of knowing that.
Wow. So is it the same notes as like a regular guitar, or is it different? Completely different.
It's tuned differently, uh, and it follows all with a single scale. So it could be in C sharp, it can be in D. It's tuned differently, but also the makeup of the instruments are quite different as well.
Oh,
The idea, I'm not a multifaceted and musician or a multi instrumentalist, so I don't want to say something out of line. Um,
mhm,
However, there are different ideas of how to play, say something from the Western tradition and then from the quote unquote Eastern tradition. There's just a different notation style, different idea of how sounds should be made and compositions should be done. So
mhm,
people have navigated guitar in the Indian style, and they've also obviously navigated anything else through the sitar. So I think any instrument is a tool.
oh, nice. I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah.
So, what advice would you give our listeners who want to pursue a passion in writing poetry?
Um, First, read a lot. Kurban, if there are various poems in here that if you've read a lot of poetry across different disciplines, you can find the poets that I make allusions to or that I give homage to.
Mhm,
Not to be coy, one of my poems, the love poem in there, is to his coy mistress, Andrew Marvell, right? It's a play on it. There's a lot in here that comes from an extensive background of reading poetry. Now, I
mhm,
may not it's not that I may not. I do not claim to be perfect at poetry. I don't think anyone can claim to be. So what I would suggest to people is you need not reach perfection in this. You just need to enjoy it. So read a lot, enjoy it, see what you would like to write, and see
mhm,
all the ways that words can enter your mind and the way that you can connect them to the outside world. And don't be afraid. There's no
mhm.
gauge on good and bad. It's sometimes it's just what touches people. So just write.
That's true. That's really great advice. I want to thank you so much for coming on my podcast today and chatting with me and reading your poem. I really enjoyed it.
I'm glad. Thank you so much for letting me read it. Yeah, and if anyone's listening to this podcast later on or is right now here on this stream, feel free to buy Gurban anywhere and let me know your thoughts. I'm on Facebook, Zaira Pirzada, my author page. I will be having a website as well.
Thank you. You have a great day.
Likewise.
Bye. Hey everyone, I want to thank you so much. Oh my God, my dog is barking. Apologize. So, if you all want to purchase her books, if you all want to purchase her book, Kaban, then you can Google it or you can go on Amazon and it is available for purchase. And just I want to thank you all so much for supporting my podcast and thank you all so much for listening. I hope you all have a great day, make great choices, and bye.